Taking a turn here now, when President Trump was asked exactly who would be running the country of Venezuela temporarily, he referred to the officials standing there behind him at the podium. And one of those officials joins us now, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for joining us. I want to begin tonight with the soldiers and sailors involved in this. We're very happy. Thank you again. We are very happy to hear that there was no loss of American life in this mission. And I understand you're just back from Joint Base Andrews, where you met with some of the team members involved in all of this. How are they doing? And you were watching this unfold. What did you see?
I saw the best of America. I saw men and women dedicating their lives to defending our country and to accomplishing that mission. And I just landed here at Joint Base Andrews, had a chance to meet a lot of them firsthand who were involved, walk through the tick-tock of what can only be described as the most sophisticated, most complicated, and most successful joint special operations raid of all time. I mean, nothing of this size scope when you actually unpack what was done kinetically and non-kinetically, that many people, that many moving parts, that consequential, and they got the job done. And despite any obstacles in front of them, it is incredible to be able to serve such courageous, brave, and skilled Americans. We do right by them, and President Trump did. He gave them a clear mission, and they finished it.
Well, Mr. Secretary, I'd love to talk about the mission now because there are questions about what happens next in Venezuela. The president said today that the U.S. is going to be running the country. What does that look like? Does that mean we're going to see Americans on the corners of Venezuela, in the government of Venezuela? Are you prepared to have troops on the ground in Venezuela?
Well, it means we set the terms. President Trump sets the terms, and ultimately he'll decide what the iterations are of that. But it means the drugs stop flowing. It means the oil that was taken from us is returned ultimately, and that criminals are not sent to the United States. It means that foreign countries don't have a lodgment inside our hemisphere. So ultimately, we're going to control what happens next because of this brave decision. President Trump has shown American leadership, and he'll be able to dictate where we go next.
So, Mr. Secretary, then, by your words there, I imagine you are prepared for a full-scale U.S. intervention to stabilize the country of Venezuela if asked for by the president. If that comes to pass, will you ask Congress for approval? Do you believe legally you need to ask Congress for approval?
Well, we're postured, and the president said the blockade continues, no oil going in and out, no drug boats allowed to traffic in the Caribbean or the East Pac, so we're still poised there. This was a law enforcement exercise. It was the Department of War in support of the Department of Justice pulling out an indicted person who ultimately will face justice, and Marco was clear there that this is not something you notify Congress about beforehand, but were there to be more or extensions to this, of course we'll keep Congress involved. They're our partners, and we would do so.
All right, Mr. Secretary, hold there for just a moment. We're going to fit in a commercial break. To our viewers at home, we'll be back shortly with more with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Stay with us. You're watching the CBS Evening News. We're back. You're watching the CBS Evening News. If you're just joining us, we're in a live conversation with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, just back from Joint Base Andrews, where he met some of the soldiers and sailors involved in that mission in Venezuela. Mr. Secretary, thank you for staying with us. I want to go back to the, to the rationale tonight. Is it about freedom or is it about oil? At the press conference today, President Trump seemed to indicate that both were a factor.
Freedom, security, prosperity. Of course, there are what was done by Venezuela against American oil interests, oil companies is well understood and never should have happened. And President Trump is willing to recapture that. But it's also the security of our hemisphere. If people understood what Venezuela was trafficking in with other adversaries, weapons they were trafficking, and then, of course, the drugs and the cartels, the poisoning of the American people, the violence, Tren de Aragua that have been brought to our shores, all three of those combined together in this bold and courageous action from President Trump. He takes nothing off the table. So what happens next will be in the hands of Venezuelans to decide. But ultimately, America will benefit security-wise and with prosperity, and we believe the Venezuelan people can as well.
You know, Mr. Secretary, today at the press conference, you said, and I'm going to say it slowly so I get it right, Maduro effed around and found out. And that's obviously a message not only to Maduro, but to many American adversaries around the world. And it comes on the heels of President Trump saying that U.S. intervention in Iran would be possible if Iran kills protesters. It comes as Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Cuba should possibly be worried tonight. What's next here? What's the message? Who did you have in mind when you said F around and find out globally?
Well, I referred also to the Iranians and their nuclear capabilities. The president said they will never get a nuclear bomb. The Iranians didn't believe it. He acted. He said the same thing about Maduro. He acted. He said the same thing with the Houthis. He acted. Southern border acted. We're going to do something about drugs. He's acting. We're acting with striking drug boats. This is a president of action. And you don't get peace in this dangerous world without strength. So there's been a lot of politicians that want to talk. They want to talk peace. They want to talk diplomacy. They want to talk negotiations. They want to talk globalism, international organizations. President Trump speaks through action. And so our allies understand that, and they're stepping up, spending more. Our adversaries understand that. So all around the world should take notice. American leadership is back. When he says something matters, it does. And we will take the necessary action with the full weight of the Department of War.
You know, Mr. Secretary, in the aftermath of this successful mission, there were tears of joy in Caracas, in Miami. Venezuelan refugees obviously thrilled to see Maduro out of power, his capture. You can understand why. They've got all that oil, and yet the country itself has skyrocketing prices. His own people have been starving. And yet a meaningful number of Americans would wake up to this news and they'd be ripped back 20 years to another American president, another U.S. intervention. I'm thinking of the war in Iraq. And that led to a significant loss of U.S. treasure and of U.S. blood. Many of the president's own supporters tonight are wondering, how is this time around going to be different? And how is it in the U.S. interest?
It's the exact opposite. I mean, we spent decades and decades and purchased in blood and got nothing economically in return. And President Trump flips the script. He says through strategic action, we can ensure that we have access to additional wealth and resources, enabling a country to unleash that without having to spend American blood. I mean, this was a bold and audacious move, but it was thought through. It was well orchestrated. Our military had time to set it up. He provided the resources, and then he took that bold stroke. And through it, we flipped that very dynamic. And Americans will benefit. Venezuela has a long history of being a rich and prosperous country. It's been stolen away from its people by horrific leadership. We can do both, help them and help the United States in the Western Hemisphere by reestablishing the Monroe Doctrine. Peace through strength with our allies was demonstrated last night. And I think I know the hemisphere will benefit from President Trump's bold action.
All right, Mr. Secretary, we're going to ask you to hold there for one more commercial break. We're going to fit it in now to our viewers. You're watching the CBS Evening News. We'll be back in just a moment with one final question for Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. Stay with us. We're back on the CBS Evening News with one final question tonight with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. Mr. Secretary, it is very difficult to look into the future, but part of your job is to do so. What can you tell us about what the next week in Venezuela is going to look like?
It's going to look like American strength. It's going to look like options for President Trump. It's going to look like protecting American interests and ensuring they're advanced, stopping drugs, ensuring that ultimately the oil resources are, he said it clearly at the podium today. We're going to get American companies in there. We're going to get investment there. These oil depots have been operating at 20% capacity. That's going to change. And we're going to stop the flood of people into the United States. It's a good day.
Good evening. We're back in New York tonight, back on the story that shook the world this weekend, the sudden U.S. raid on Nicolás Maduro. Delta Force commandos snatched the Venezuelan dictator and his wife from a fortified compound in Caracas on Saturday. And now they are both here in New York City tonight in a notorious federal detention facility. Charlie D'Agata is standing by in West Palm Beach with more on the raid and what critics of the president are saying about it. But we're going to begin by welcoming Matt Gutman to CBS News. He is live outside the Brooklyn jail holding Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores. And this is a moment for you, Matt. Good evening. Almost a decade ago, I want to let our viewers know you and the producer you are standing with now in Brooklyn were held together by the Maduro regime in prison in Venezuela. Quite a full circle moment. Excited to have you here. Good evening.
Thanks, Tony. It is good to be with you. And yes, quite a full circle. Unexpected, to say the least. Now, you mentioned Maduro's arraignment. It is set for noon tomorrow, and he faces a slew of federal charges, including for narco-terrorism, which, if convicted, could net him decades in prison. Less than 18 hours after that fiery early morning capture in Caracas, Nicolás Maduro and his wife spent their first night in U.S. lockup at the Metropolitan Detention Center in New York City. Maduro and his wife Celia Flores being held on multiple federal charges. The pair touching down Saturday afternoon on a government jet just north of New York City. Dozens of federal officials there on the ground, many of them taking advantage of the photo op. The couple were then choppered to the DEA headquarters in New York City, where they were booked and fingerprinted. And again, Maduro was paraded by agents, this time offering them a cordial greeting.
Good night. Happy New Year.
And finally, this motorcade ferrying them to their last stop back here at the Metropolitan Detention Center.
The MDC is a far cry from Maduro's palace in Caracas. Now, law enforcement sources tell us that he is being held in one of the top floors of this jail. They say that he is not being held in isolation, but is being held with other higher profile inmates.
The federal jail facility is notorious for poor conditions and the infamous inmates it has housed, including accused murderer Luigi Mangione, Sean Diddy Combs, and Epstein co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell.
Judges in New York have been very critical of this MDC prison.
David Marcus was Maxwell's attorney, and he describes conditions inside as barbaric.
What's it like inside?
If we saw an American being held in a prison like this in Venezuela, we would yell and scream and say it's a human rights violation. They keep it frigid in there. The food is not fit for human consumption.
Caroline Polisi is a criminal defense attorney and says tomorrow's arraignment starts the clock for prosecutors to turn over evidence.
Do you think that Maduro can get a fair trial in the United States?
Absolutely. The prosecution wants to make sure every element of this trial is not prejudicial. They, just as much as the defense, want this case to be fair and impartial.
Now, while there is some question about the strength of the government's evidence against Maduro, what seems not to be in question among the legal analysts that we talk to is whether he can get a fair trial in the U.S. Tony.
Matt, thank you very much. Great to have you here. Many Venezuelans living outside their home country have been celebrating Maduro's capture, including in the Miami suburb of Doral, where roughly half the population is of Venezuelan descent. Christian Benavides is there for us tonight, where there is new hope for their home country and for seeing their loved ones once again. Christian, good evening.
Tony, good evening. It's been an around-the-clock celebration for so many Venezuelans who gathered by the hundreds outside this Venezuelan restaurant here in Doral, Florida, since yesterday, and they're back here again tonight.
Celebrations marking the end of Nicolás Maduro's rule erupted throughout the weekend, notably in South Florida. It's home to 500,000 Venezuelans. We met 25-year-old Christopher Moreno. He and his family arrived in the U.S. in 2016, fleeing the Maduro regime.
It's just a feeling. I can't explain it. We make a life here because we had to, not because we wanted to. So we really want to go back.
He is one of roughly 8 million Venezuelans, more than a quarter of the country's population, who fled the troubled country in the last decade, the largest exodus in Latin America's modern history. While the exiled community celebrated Maduro's ouster, a different scene in Caracas, where there's tense anticipation and uncertainty and a rush for basics, including food and medicine. Hard times are coming, this woman says, but I hope it will bring significant change to Venezuela. Today at the Vatican, Pope Leo XIV criticized U.S. intervention. He's not alone. There were protests around the world, including in the U.S.
We know that these wars cost billions of dollars, and that is money that could be used to help the working class in the United States.
But for so many Venezuelans, this is a moment they've waited for over 25 years of hardline rule.
I think we deserve having freedom. We're good people.
It is difficult to overstate the joy and the hope that is being felt here by so many Venezuelans that the toppling of Nicolás Maduro could mean the return of freedom and democracy to Venezuela. Tony?
Christian, I think you captured it beautifully. Thank you very much. Tonight, U.S. airlines are flying again in and out of the Caribbean, but the surprise U.S. attack on Venezuela prompted the FAA to close the airspace over much of the area on Saturday. And Chris Van Cleave reports many stranded Americans are still waiting for their flights home.
With the airspace closed, we heard from many travelers who feared they wouldn't be able to get out of the Caribbean for up to a week. The airlines have ramped up service, added flights, using bigger airplanes to try to get as many people home as fast as possible.
The Crane family was wrapping up their holiday vacation with a flight home to New York Saturday, but that flight was among the more than 1,100 canceled after the FAA closed the airspace over much of the Caribbean. The day-long closure impacted more than a dozen airports, including those in Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Aruba.
I'm a teacher. I'm supposed to go back to work tomorrow.
This family of 5 is still in Puerto Rico and won't all be home until late Wednesday night.
We've continued to search frantically to try to get something. We found a flight for our eldest daughter, who's 18. We found a flight for her Tuesday, so she can go home a day earlier.
How frustrating is this?
Oh, it's quite
very frustrated.
This was the scene at the San Juan airport Saturday. About 400 flights in and out of that airport alone were canceled. American Airlines says it added 5,000 additional seats across nearly 24 extra flights Sunday. Southwest added more than a dozen flights through Monday. Newlywed Christine Moore got stuck at the Philadelphia airport after her flight to Barbados was grounded Saturday.
This weekend of all weekends for my honeymoon to be canceled.
Actor Leonardo DiCaprio was supposed to be accepting an award at the Palm Springs Film Festival this weekend, but he reportedly couldn't get out of St. Bart's.
I'm sorry I couldn't be there tonight. I'm stuck on the East Coast. I wish I was there to celebrate with all of you.
For the Crane family, it'll mean several days of missed work and school.
If I could get a U-Haul and pretend to be a goat and get on a cargo plane, I would do it.
Whatever expenses they accrue during these unplanned extended stays are likely coming out of the traveler's pocket because the closure was the action of the government, not the airlines. It's not the airline's responsibility to compensate flyers.
We're back, and what happens next now in Venezuela after the U.S. capture of dictator Nicolás Maduro and President Trump's plans to run the country is a big question on many people's minds. To address it and more, we're joined by exactly the right person, retired Army Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster, who, of course, served as National Security Advisor in the first Trump administration. Good evening, Lieutenant General. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, great to be with you, Tony. Thanks for having me.
So, General, one way to look at what happened in the last 48 hours in Venezuela is the U.S. toppled the dictator but left the dictatorship in place. Maduro's lieutenants are all still running the country. If you're Venezuelan right now, how is that a new birth of freedom? What was the point of all this?
Well, I think the point was to bring him to justice and to take this, what is a very complicated first step to replacing the Maduro regime with a legitimate regime. You got to remember, this guy, stole the election blatantly. I mean, it was obvious to everybody that 70% plus of Venezuelans had voted that guy out of office, and he's had this devastating effect on the country. So you're right, Tony, this is just the first step in what's going to be, I think, increasing pressure on the regime, mainly focused on drying up their cash flow.
But, General, you've, of course, been here before with the toppling of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, also toppling of the Taliban in Afghanistan. Those are not exactly reassuring case studies of where this goes from here. If you were advising the president, what would you tell him to do today?
Well, I think what we have to do is look at the unique circumstances of Venezuela. It's not Iraq. It's not Afghanistan. Tony, we've been through this before. I think the problem in both those wars was that we took a short-term approach to a long-term problem set in both places. The Venezuelans ultimately have to do this themselves. But of course, what Maduro's been very good at is crushing any opposition by throwing people into jail, torturing them, murdering them, and then making kind of these brigades of kind of almost like brown shirts, to be his enforcers.
It sounds like your recommendation to this government, if you were still a part of it, would be to go all the way. Regime change is coming. It is necessary, and you should hand Venezuela back to the Venezuelan people.
Well, it would be to isolate him from sources of strength and support, including the cash flow. That's what you see with the interdiction of the oil tankers and the destruction of the boats, cutting off his access to the narcotics funds. And then, of course, there are many Venezuelans who are ready to come back and rebuild the country. Remember, there are 8 million Venezuelans have fled the country. These are really talented, resourceful people who are ready to go back and reclaim their country.
Yep, General, I hear you. It sounds like President Donald Trump's going to have to call you and hire you back in order to get your frankest recommendation this evening. I think I know where you're going with all this, though. I appreciate you shedding light on it for our viewers. Thank you very much, Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster. Good evening, I'm Tony DeCopel, and we begin here in New York City, where the now deposed president and former First Lady of Venezuela appeared today in federal court just 2 days after U.S. commandos snatched them from a compound in Caracas. The historic pictures coming in all day. Nicolás Maduro and Cilia Flores under heavy guard, clad in those blue jail shirts. And then once inside the court, they pleaded not guilty to all the charges against them. Maduro at one point tried to rise and address the court before the judge cut him off. Let's go straight to Matt Gutman, our chief correspondent, our new chief correspondent, by the way. Welcome. He was there for all of it, and he joins us now from the Federal Detention Center in Brooklyn, where Maduro and his wife are being held at this hour. Matt, good evening.
Good evening, Tony. It has been a stunning turn of events for Maduro, who just a couple of days ago was the ruler of an oil-rich nation. Now he is in a freezing jail cell in that detention facility behind me. Now, in court earlier, he was both compliant and defiant, saying that he was kidnapped, but also that he is still the legal president of Venezuela.
Under heavy guard, Nicolás Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores were flown from a federal jail in Brooklyn to Manhattan this morning, surrounded by Drug Enforcement Agency officials. The shackled former president of Venezuela shuffled from the chopper to an armored vehicle and was then driven to a federal courthouse, where he was greeted by the NYPD and protesters.
What we have right now are demonstrators here right outside the courthouse. They're saying, "Who are we, Venezuela? What do we want? Freedom." Now, they've been here for about 2 hours. On the other side, there are people who oppose his detention.
Inside the courtroom, Maduro, in a dark prison jumpsuit, was initially defiant, declaring through a translator that he is a decent man, was innocent of all the charges, and was still the president of Venezuela. Both he and his wife then pleaded not guilty. Maduro faces 4 federal drug and weapons-related charges. He was indicted during the first Trump administration in 2020. Federal prosecutors accused Maduro, his wife, sons, and others of partnering with some of the most violent and prolific drug traffickers and narco-terrorists in the world to distribute thousands of tons of cocaine to the United States for decades. Saturday's risky operation by the U.S. military sliced right into the heart of Venezuela's capital. During the raid, Flores' attorney said she may have suffered an injury to her ribs. It is unclear if Maduro was injured, but in court the judge promised them full medical attention.
What happens next?
So the arraignment is the official start of this clock ticking for the trial. Both sides have waived their right to a speedy trial, meaning this could be quite a bit of time. There will be multiple...
Meaning months, years?
Absolutely.
Now, at one point during the arraignment, it seemed that Maduro was trying to grandstand, and the judge shut him right down. He said, "I just need to know that you understand the charges against you and your rights." Now, at this point, Maduro's lawyers have waived his right to bail, which means he'll be staying in that detention facility behind me. His next court appearance is March 17th, Tony.
All right, Matt, thank you very much. Glad to have you with us. While Maduro and his wife are in a cell here in America, a battle is underway for their country, for the future of Venezuela. Who's in charge there? Is it Maduro's deputies or is it the United States? Ed O'Keefe is on this tonight for us from the White House. Ed, good evening to you.
Tony, good evening. More than 48 hours since the U.S. pulled Maduro out of Venezuela, there are still few answers about what's next, with the president and some of his top aides saying different things about what to expect.
President Trump's national security team briefed senior lawmakers tonight amid mounting questions over the strategy in Venezuela. The president has threatened more strikes if current Venezuelan leaders don't behave, and announced the U.S. is now in charge of a country of 31 million people and its vast oil reserves.
Don't ask me who's in charge, because I'll give you an answer and it'll be very controversial.
What does that mean?
It means we're in charge.
But Secretary of State Marco Rubio said they're mainly pressuring the country economically.
What you're seeing right now is an oil quarantine that allows us to exert tremendous leverage over what happens next.
While Trump's UN ambassador today downplayed talk of total control.
There is no war against Venezuela or its people. We are not occupying a country.
Much of Maduro's regime is still in office. Today, his number 2, Delcy Rodriguez was sworn in as interim president. Trump has threatened she could go next if she doesn't allow full U.S. access to Venezuela's vast oil supplies.
We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure.
Top oil industry leaders are expected to meet with administration officials later this week about how to tap back into the reserves, a years-long project that could cost tens of billions of dollars. Connecticut Democrat Chris Murphy believes it's now clear removing Maduro wasn't about curbing drug trafficking.
Donald Trump is saying out loud that it's just about the oil. He just wants his rich oil industry friends, who he promised to help in exchange for a $1 billion contribution to his campaign, to have access to Venezuelan oil.
Now, when asked, the president was questioned about whether or not he's ruling out military action against other countries. He suggested Colombia and Cuba are among those that could face potential military action. He once again also didn't rule out taking over Greenland, but it's controlled by Denmark, whose prime minister said today if the U.S. attacks the land of a fellow NATO ally, then, quote, everything would stop. That includes NATO. Tony?
All right, Ed, thank you very much. We'll leave it there. We are learning more about the U.S. mission to capture Maduro and his wife early Saturday, how it all played out, and with no loss of American life. National security correspondent Charlie Daggett has the latest on that.
The operation to capture and arrest Nicolás Maduro was months in the planning, but also a total surprise to the Venezuelan dictator.
Nicolás Maduro got to meet some great Americans for a night vision goggles 3 nights ago. He didn't know they were coming until 3 minutes before they arrived. In fact, his wife said, I think I hear aircraft outside.
200 Americans executed the raid. Fighter jets and bombers took out Venezuelan air defenses, paving the way for Delta Force commandos to close in on the compound, where they came under fire.
They got off the helicopter and the bullets were flying all over the place. As you know, one of the helicopters got hit pretty badly. But we got everything back.
Several soldiers were injured. Dozens of Venezuelans were killed, and Cuba's government said 32 of its citizens who served on Maduro's security team also died.
But there was a lot of death on the other side, unfortunately. But a lot of Cubans were killed yesterday, trying to protect him.
Once U.S. forces breached the compound, they managed to stop Maduro before he got into a safe room. Commandos had rehearsed the raid for months using a replica of Maduro's compound.
We train, we rehearse, we debrief, we rehearse again.
CIA personnel have been on the ground since August, tracking Maduro's movements, including an agent who penetrated his inner circle and provided key intelligence. And that massive U.S. military buildup remains off the coast of Venezuela. In fact, we're learning tonight they're planning to intercept another oil tanker that they've been pursuing for weeks. Tony?
All right, Charlie, thank you very much. Maduro's capture is prompting strong reaction from Venezuelans here in the United States and those who fled across the border into Colombia. We're going to have 2 reports tonight, beginning with Lilia Luciano on the Colombia-Venezuela border. Lilia, good evening.
Tony, let's talk about the big picture. The future of Venezuelans hangs on who gets to lead long-term that country. And that battle right now is between 2 very powerful women.
En nombre de todos los venezolanos,
Delcy Rodriguez, the acting president, has been a Maduro loyalist and leading figure within the regime for nearly 8 years. She is now striking a delicate balance, telling the U.S. she wants lasting cooperation, while also telling the Venezuelans she condemns the Maduro capture as a kidnapping. As his vice president in 2024, she backed the election results, which were declared fraudulent by international monitors. We're seeing a group of protesters in the front. We were the only U.S. network crew on the ground in Caracas with opposition leader María Corina Machado when Maduro declared victory.
Protest violations of the popular.
Soon after, Maduro threatened Machado with arrest, and she went into hiding. In October, when she won the Nobel Peace Prize, she appeared confident.
The regime change was already mandated by the Venezuelan people.
But President Trump on Saturday said Machado lacks the support and respect of the Venezuelan people needed to lead them. While here many remain skeptical, there has been a strong reaction among Venezuelans living in the United States. To hear what they have to say, my colleague Cristian Benavides is in Doral, Florida.
Well, for many, there is a sense of euphoria here and cautious optimism about the future of Venezuela.
Across the United States, Venezuelans erupted in celebration over Maduro's ouster. In Florida, Andrea Ramos brought her 2 young children to witness history.
I didn't think I was going to live to see this happening, honestly.
She left Venezuela in 2016 and hopes Maduro's capture will lead to freedom and democracy.
I'm just extremely happy and thankful to the U.S. government for everything that's going on.
Hands up, anti-interventionist activists have also taken to the streets.
It speaks to the mass nature of this movement that so many people stand against this war.
Some Venezuelans do wonder just who will lead the country until an election can take place.
That's something huge because we are like an independent republic.
Yet most Venezuelans we spoke to, such as Jose Cruz, said U.S. control may be necessary to stabilize the nation.
We do love the United States, but our country is Venezuela.
It's been more than 25 years since Venezuela has been a democracy, and those we spoke to here said there is now hope that could change. Tony?
You can feel it. Christian, thank you very much. Appreciate it. The arrest of Maduro sent oil stocks higher today, with Chevron leading the way. The Dow hit a record high of nearly 49,000. Oil prices are also up. So what does that mean for the price you pay at the pump? Business analyst Jill Schlesinger is here to talk about it. All right, Jill. So a lot of focus here on the oil industry, those huge reserves. How quickly can we see an impact on the market here?
I think this is a long-term project, and we have to understand that although that Venezuela is sitting on over 300 billion barrels of oil, only 3/4 of it is easy to extract. That's one problem. The second problem is the infrastructure to do the refining really needs an upgrade. It's been degraded over 2 decades. So what we're looking for is billions of dollars of investment by U.S. companies who believe that will pay off over time. I really think we've got to set our sights to the long term, meaning not days, not months, but years.
Really? I mean, talk to me more about this, how long term. So we're talking years before the average consumer could see a change in their prices at the pump?
I think that for right now, though it's moving price at the pump is the global economy. And if you look at last year, because the global economy slowed down, crude oil went down by over 22%. That led to lower gas prices. Gas prices are actually 25 cents a gallon cheaper today than they were a year ago. That's going to be the more important thing. What Americans can expect is the global economy will dominate.
All right, as it always does. Jill, thank you very much. You dominate. Thank you for being there. Appreciate it. As you just heard from Jill, we should not expect this to affect gas prices much, which does raise the question of how exactly it helps the United States, if it helps the United States at all. What is this actually about? Well, if you zoom out, you can maybe see at least the outlines of an answer. For decades now, Russia, China, and Iran have been building a presence in Venezuela, a base of power and influence there in this hemisphere. With Maduro now out, that base of power and influence could be out too. And good evening once again. We're off to South Florida tonight as we launch our Live from America tour, Doral to be exact, our first stop because it's home to the largest Venezuelan community in America. Some of them are here with me tonight, sitting at El Arapazo. That is the restaurant at the absolute center of those massive celebrations you've seen over the past few days. So many Venezuelans have fled decades of what seemed to be a hopeless dictatorship, but now, as of this very week, they are among some of the most hopeful people in America. In just a moment, you're going to see our conversations on the streets of Doral, but we're going to begin tonight with the questions about the Trump administration's plans for the future of Venezuela and the president's threat towards a different country now, a NATO ally. Ed O'Keefe leads us off tonight from the White House.
Tonight, the White House is doubling down on President Trump's pursuit of Greenland, saying that utilizing the U.S. military is always an option.
The United States should have Greenland as part of the United States.
There's an American military base with approximately 150 troops on the island, a semi-autonomous territory of Denmark, which is a NATO partner. European leaders today slammed the idea of a takeover, saying Greenland belongs to its people, while congressional Democrats said the move would have disastrous consequences.
Nothing would lead to the absolute destruction of NATO more than American aggressive action against a long-term ally like Denmark.
The renewed focus on Greenland comes as questions remain about the president's strategy in Venezuela. Today, he shared more details about the weekend capture of Nicolás Maduro.
It was so complex, 152 airplanes, many. Talk about boots on the ground. We had a lot of boots on the ground.
But it was amazing. The electricity for almost the entire country was, boom, turned off. That's when they knew there was a problem. There was no electricity.
CBS News has learned that as the Maduros tried to escape into their safe room, Delta Force commandos threw stun grenades in their direction. Officials say they were bleeding when captured. Venezuelan authorities confirmed at least 24 of their officers were killed in the weekend raid, and the country's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, said today the Venezuelan government is in charge, and no one else.
I've been saying it for a long time. Nobody can take us.
Trump has claimed he's in control and said there won't be new elections in the country for at least 30 days.
The Pentagon tonight says 2 U.S. service members are still recovering from injuries sustained during the operation to remove Maduro from Venezuela. 5 additional service members were injured, but have already returned to duty. Tony?
Glad to hear it, Ed. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano is just across the border tonight from Venezuela. She's in the country of Colombia, and she joins us now live. Lilia, good evening.
Good evening to you, Tony. Look, the further you get from Venezuela, the louder the celebrations. But inside the country, that is not an option, because even though Nicolás Maduro is out, the regime is still very much there. There are these armed militias that are called colectivos that have been canvassing the streets of Caracas and cities beyond. Only public displays of support for Maduro are tolerated, and any hint of support for the U.S. can be met with arrest. But it's not just civilians that are on edge. Last night, gunfire rang out near the presidential palace, and it turns out that it was the military shooting down some commercial drones. And here at the border, you can feel the volatility. As you can see, there are these armored trucks that are here, part of a major deployment from the Colombian military in order to prevent or to control any possible spillover of violence or migration. Tony?
Yeah, Lilia, you can feel it. You can see it as well. Thank you very much. With the dictator Maduro gone, but his deputies still in power there in Caracas, the question of who should lead Venezuela into this new era of democracy is an urgent one. In an exclusive interview, Venezuelan opposition leader María Corina Machado told us it's obvious to her who should lead next. Are you the person to lead Venezuela into that next chapter of freedom? Should you be the next leader of Venezuela?
Well, the people of Venezuela have already chosen. And if there's something I feel proud about, is how Venezuelans have understand that this is a personal, individual decision. It's not a matter only of leadership. It's a matter of a whole society committed to do what it takes, to take responsibility for our own future.
So in other words, the answer is yes, is what I'm hearing. You won that primary. You were then banned from running. I asked you, should you be the next leader of Venezuela? You say you already have won what's necessary to become it. So the answer is yes?
Absolutely yes. And we have a president-elect who is Edmundo González Urrutia, and we are ready and willing to serve our people as we have been mandated.
The Trump administration, and Donald Trump in particular, surprised, even shocked some people by saying he does not support you as the next leader of Venezuela or your party. He said for you, you're nice, but you lack respect in the country and that it would be tough for you to lead. Have you spoken to him since Maduro's capture? And what would you say to him? What do you want him to know?
No, I have not spoken to him this year, and I have insisted in a clear message on behalf of the Venezuelan people. We are very, very grateful. A few weeks ago, people would have said it was impossible to reach this point. And President Trump's leadership and courage has brought Nicolás Maduro to face justice. And this is huge. This is a major step towards restoring prosperity and rule of law and democracy in Venezuela.
Ms. Machado, on that point, the people who put those individuals in prison, many of them are still in power. In fact, all of them, with the exception of Maduro. And the deputy of Maduro, a vice president of his, Delcy Rodriguez, is now the interim president. She is in charge. Some people in the U.S. say she's a moderate, that she's going to cooperate with the U.S. What do you think? Do you think she's the right person to lead Venezuela right now?
Everybody in Venezuela and abroad knows perfectly who she is and the role she has played. She was sanctioned by the United States government because of the corruption and all the involvement she has in criminal activities. Beyond that, she has been the architect, one of the main architects and director of the torture centers in Venezuela, of repression towards our innocent people. And the main link, the main actor that has relations with Russia, with Iran, and other countries that have, obscure and criminal activities in Venezuela. So certainly she's nothing but like a moderate. I think it's evident the United States has instructed her to take certain actions regarding further dismantling of the criminal structure as a path forward towards a complete transition to democracy in Venezuela.
It sounds like you're saying she's done a lot of bad in the past, but now she is a puppet of the United States.
Well, I will not speculate once again. I think she is in a very critical position because nobody trusts her. Nobody.
And we'll be putting that full conversation online. And by the way, while I have you, we also asked Machado if she thought that a year from now she'd be in a position to be able to personally host me at the presidential palace there in Venezuela. She said, quote, as soon as possible when Venezuela is free. And as we walk the streets of Doral today, home to tens of thousands of Venezuelans, many of them victims of Chavez or Maduro or both, we heard that same wish for democracy and that same choice for their leader, María Corina Machado. In Doral, even in the local Italian gelato shop, you run into Venezuelans, some of the thousands here to escape the misery and danger of their lives under Nicolás Maduro. And now, in the aftermath of the U.S. raid to remove him, some of the most hopeful people in America. Freddie Hernandez owns the place, and his nephew Victor helps scoop. What do you hope happens now in Venezuela? There has to be a political and economic transformation, he tells me. It has to become a prosperous country, as it was before. Both had what's known as temporary protected status, allowing them to stay in America legally, a status the Trump administration ended last year. But if the White House thinks Venezuelans like these will be heading back once their country is stabilized, that's not what we heard. Do you think your nephew will have a brighter future in America, or is it now potentially Venezuela? His future is here, he told me. Just outside, we noticed a group still waving flags of celebration. And when it comes to who should lead Venezuela next, there's only one answer we heard.
To me, it is unquestionable, should be María Corina.
You feel that way?
¿Te sientes lo mismo?
Sí.
We found Luis Rodriguez, who at 26 said life in Venezuela was worthless until now. How do you feel about the future of Venezuela today?
So today it's been a hope. It's been a really hope for all of us, for all Venezuelans. We've been afraid for more than 25 years.
And many told me today that the movement Luis was talking about there is not going to end. It's not going to end until there is democracy in Venezuela once again.